Welcome to the Workflow Podcast. If you enjoy this show, please like, share, and or subscribe. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome back to the Workflow Podcast for our season on optimizing your body and mind. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about fasting and how eating nothing at all can actually optimize, at least for short periods of time, how alert you are at your desk and the quality of your cognition. So how fasting elevates your focus. So it's kind of funny to be saying, or kind of ironic or against the narrative to be saying, hey, don't eat anything at all, because nowadays, turn on the television, open Google, check Instagram, we're absolutely bombarded with companies promoting the latest food fad, whether it's eat vegan, eat paleo, take this protein powder, consume activated turmeric, jump on the carnivore diet, go keto, but perhaps eating nothing at all can deliver the same, if not better, benefits when it comes to our health and our ability to perform at work. Now, why does fasting improve our alertness and our cognition? Well, like a lot of things, it goes back to our evolutionary past. To give you some perspective, human beings have only really walked this earth in our current form as Homo sapiens for about 250 odd thousand years. Now, that number is debated. Some say 100,000, some say 500,000, but 250 odd thousand seems to be a widely accepted number, which, if you consider the widely held idea that the earth has been spinning for 4 billion years, we've not been here all that long. And then when you think about the fact that for 240,000 of those 250,000 years, we were essentially hunter-gatherers running around in tribes of no more than, say, 150 people. But a lot of the literature suggests that those tribes were a lot smaller, like groups of 5 to 10 would go hunting, foraging, and everything else. And so it was really only 10,000 years ago that somebody picked up a plow, and with it, agriculture was born. And with agriculture, the need to move from place to place, or the proclivity towards moving from place to place, subsided, because now you had lands to tend to, and therefore permanent abodes became a thing. And with that came land, with that came societies, with that came wars, and everything we know up until this point. Now, that was really, say, the first big agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago. The second big agricultural revolution really tied in with the Industrial Revolution about 200 to 250 years ago. That was the second big step forward for humanity, and the third would have to be today's technological revolution. Now, why do I tell you this? Well, because when we were hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years, we did not know when we would eat next, oftentimes. We could go days without eating. And so our brain had to learn to conserve energy for moments of fight or flight, because if we went 3 days without eating and suddenly came across a saber-toothed tiger, we would still need to tap into enough energy reserves to run away. Similarly, if we came across a wild hog, we would want to tap into those energy reserves to hunt it down and hopefully feed our tribe for the next few days. Now, this also, while that sounds beneficial to us, and I'm perhaps going off on a tangent here, but this is also one of the reasons why in the absence of systems, we are far more likely to take the path of least effort when it comes to our work because our brain is wired to conserve energy. So this is going to be a topic for another episode, but if I sit down to my desk first thing in the morning, my brain's going to want to just check email, to check LinkedIn, to jump onto Twitter, to check other social media platforms, because that doesn't really take up that much mental energy. It's not the same as really getting into flow and getting into that deep work state. And that, of course, while it feels good in the moment, can get between us and our goals. But from a fasting perspective, our brain evolved so that when we go, say, more than 16 hours without food, rather than using what we've eaten, our glycogen stores as energy, it will start to feed off our fat reserves. And when it does that, it also releases ketones and uses ketones in the brain as a source of energy for cognition, which is a much slower release source of energy than, say, what we've just eaten. So, for example, if I eat a burger for lunch, that might give me energy for an hour or two, but I'm likely to suffer a crash thereafter and find it very difficult to focus, particularly if that was a white bread bun, which is going to spike my glycemic index, and I'm going to find it very hard to focus an hour or two afterwards. Whereas with ketones, that release of energy is much slower, and rather than experiencing a spike, it's going to be a slow burn of moderate release energy. I'm going to be able to focus for longer. The other thing that happens here, so a 2018 study on intermittent fasting, which was published in Nature, which is a widely respected journal, found that fasting was linked to the release of BDNF, which is a topic we will also discuss insofar as sunlight is concerned, but it was linked to the release of BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is linked to alertness and improved cognition, as well as the release of adrenaline. Again, adrenaline, like BDNF, makes us more alert and more focused when we are at our desks. Fasting was also linked with improved sensory motor function, healthy cell maintenance and growth, the production of antioxidant and DNA repair enzymes, and protection against the deleterious effects of stress. Now, this is why I personally like to fast, because I find that when I am in a fasted state, and when I say fasted state, I'm talking about having gone somewhere between 12 and 18 hours without eating, I am a lot more focused. My body is not focused on digesting food. I'm not feeling that lethargy that can sometimes come with eating. And my brain is tapping into that evolutionary wiring where it's releasing BDNF, adrenaline, because it thinks it's still on the African savanna and it's trying to maintain alertness in case I come across prey or I come across a predator. But I can apply, or I can capitalize on that evolutionary wiring and use it to my advantage rather than be the victim of it when it comes to taking the path of least effort with my work. Now, this 2018 study also found that lifestyles characterized by little to no fasting, so say 3 square meals a day plus snacks and negligible exercise, result in suboptimal brain functionality and an increased risk of major neurodegenerative diseases, which kind of flies in the face of a lot of the literature that I grew up with, which was make sure you eat breakfast before you come to school, otherwise you're going to fall asleep, you're not going to be focused, and all the rest of it. And you take that learning and you take it with you into adulthood. And I was probably 30 or 31 before I really started experimenting with fasting, up until which point I would have a banana first thing in the morning before I hit the gym. So we're talking 6 a.m. or back then it was like 5 a.m. Go to the gym and then come back, and I would down 2 cups of oats, a couple of handfuls of blueberries, perhaps another banana, as well as some protein powder and milk. So it was a very carb and protein heavy breakfast. I think there was even some yogurt in that breakfast. So I did that for a very long time. And as soon as I started fasting, I found my performance in terms of my focus in the mornings was way better than what it was previously. And I also found that there were other benefits which were unintended, such as I became leaner because I was skipping one really calorie dense and carb dense meal a day. And my body was also tapping into some of my fat stores for energy, which again helped me trim down and become leaner than what I was previously. So moving on from that 2018 study on intermittent fasting towards, or maybe moving backwards rather, to a 1988 study 30 years prior, which found that fasting enhanced growth hormone secretion, which essentially has anti-aging properties and helps us maintain, build, and repair healthy tissues, speed up healing, boost muscle mass and metabolism, and burn fat. So again, on the topic of waking up and going to the gym, and perhaps I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, which isn't directly related to work, but for those of you who have done weight training, you've probably heard people wax enthusiastic about eating within 30 minutes of working out because that's going to help your muscles repair and grow big and strong. Now, unless you're into bodybuilding and you want to be on the stage at Mr. Olympia, when you don't eat after a workout, for a couple of hours after a weight training workout, you're actually stimulating the release of growth hormone, which actually helps you develop muscle mass, but also has anti-aging properties. And now this is something that Ben Greenfield, a huge name in the space of human performance optimization, also echoed when I spoke to him on the Future Squared podcast. He was essentially alluding to the fact that he came out of a bodybuilding. He used to be a bodybuilder and he used to follow that, eat straight after a workout. But having researched it himself as well, finds that you're better off not eating for a couple of hours after a weight training workout. One other thing that Ben Greenfield also talks about is that fasting does stimulate autophagy when the body recycles damaged cells and cleans up cellular waste. Now, that essentially means that we become literally better versions of ourselves in terms of our anatomy and the cellular makeup of our bodies as far as that is concerned. Now, in terms of how long you need to fast to derive that benefit, a lot of the literature says that you reach that state of autophagy when your body starts to repair its cells after 16 hours. But Ben Greenfield likes to say that even 12 hours can have benefits insofar as cellular cleanup is concerned. It's interesting, I've read so many books by the likes of, say, and that's not me signaling, this is me just making a point, from the likes of, say, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epicurus, like a lot of Greek and ancient Roman philosophers who talked about the benefits of fasting and how it sharpened the mind. And this is wisdom from 2,000 plus years ago. And it's funny how now science is actually validating what a lot of these thinkers intuitively knew. And perhaps some of this stuff that I'm talking about you intuitively know as well. But it's also, I find it's always helpful to know that the science backs it too, because that is going to trigger you, or at least prompt you to make that behavior part of your lifestyle rather than something you intuitively sort of know but don't really proactively practice. So if you want to start fasting, if you want to make this part of your routine and you're not already doing it, where do you start how long should you fast? Well, you can always start with just going 12 hours without eating. That's not all that difficult. If you think about having your last meal at 8 p.m., perhaps that's when you shut the gates, so to speak, and not eating until 8 a.m. the next day. I mean, really, you don't eat from 8 to 10 maybe. You go to bed, you wake up at, say, 6. Perhaps if you have kids, you get the kids ready for school, you do your morning thing, maybe you work out, and before you know it, it's 8 a.m. and that's your 12 hours there. Now, perhaps the most common, most popular form of intermittent fasting would have to be the 16-8, which is 16 hours of fasting followed by 8 hours of feeding, sounding like a vampire there, but 16 hours of fasting followed by 8 hours of feeding. That's what I tend to do, maybe 5 to 6 days a week. I tend to fast from about 8 p.m. till midday the next day. Sometimes it is 7 p.m. till 11 a.m. Now, I do cheat a little bit. I do allow myself the luxury of a espresso with a touch of milk in it in the mornings. Not really enough to take me out of autophagy, but not a strict fast. Now, you can still have, say, black coffee, a long black, a filter coffee with no milk in it. That's completely fine. That's got no calories in it, so it's not going to impair your fast or the benefits of your fast at all. There are other variations of fast that you can try. For example, a 14-10 fast, 14 hours of fasting followed by 10 hours of feeding. Some people like to do 24-hour alternate day fasting, so that would mean eating on Monday, not on Tuesday, eating on Wednesday, not on Thursday, eating on Friday, and so on and so on. Spontaneous meal skipping is an easy entry point where it's just, hey, today I'm not going to eat breakfast. Maybe in a couple of days' time, I'm not going to eat lunch. But this is not necessarily something planned. Maybe it's just the fact that, hey, it's 1 o'clock. This is when I normally eat, but I'm so immersed in my work and I'm actually not at all hungry right now. So I'm just not going to eat lunch. I'll eat dinner instead, or I'll have a light snack in the mid-afternoon. Sometimes we fall into habits where we just eat because a certain time has shown up on our wristwatch. But if you're not hungry, really, you should not eat. We have a tendency to overeat in the West, and I think a lot of the ancient wisdom on eating, particularly from the likes of, say, Taoism, Lao Tzu, who wasn't really an actual person as far as the scholars are concerned, wrote that we should really get to 80% in a lot of things, particularly with food. We should not eat to be 100% full. We should eat to get to maybe 80% full. And again, if you're not feeling hungry, well, don't eat a full meal. So there's some of the variations you might want to try. There's many others out there. There are 72-hour water fasts. I have not personally tried that myself. I know a large number of people who swear by doing that once a month or once every 3 months. But again, with anything like this, it's always worthwhile to perhaps speak to a physician or a doctor beforehand, because I'm not privy to your unique circumstances in terms of your health, and your body may not react to, say, going 16 or 24 hours without eating as well as it might someone who doesn't have your same sort of medical background. So definitely speak to a physician before you embark upon any form of fasting diet in your life. So again, recapping, fasting helps us become more alert when we're at our desks. It releases brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It releases adrenaline, and ultimately helps us feel better, repairs damaged cells, creates new cells, and makes us better versions of ourselves. So it's something that big health and wellness companies perhaps aren't big proponents of because, hey, they don't make money off it. It doesn't cost anything to not eat, right? Sure, they might try and sell you some kind of fasting recovery foods and pills and things like that. And I know many of the MCT oil companies say that you can augment your fast with MCT oils, and I think you can. It doesn't necessarily break the fast. There are calories in there, but in terms of the release of ketones in the brain, which help you focus, remember those slow release source of energy, MCT oils can help. So, hey, look at that, look into that, perhaps do your own research. But ultimately, fasting, much like the benefits of sunlight, is absolutely free and something that can help to optimize your cognition today. With that, I'm going to bring this episode of the Workflow podcast to a close. As always, you can find a hell of a lot more information over at steveglaveski.com. Until next time, peace out.